My husband locked me in the spare bedroom hours ago. I was lying on the couch in the living room, reading, when he called out for me. I found him in the spare room, and when I walked in, he pushed past me and locked the door. I thought he was pranking me or joking around, but he said, "It's safe in there. Do not make a sound. I'm not kidding, Grace. When you hear this knock, it's safe to come out. If the door unlocks, but you did not hear this knock, do not open the door." Then he knocked a special knock. "Repeat it so I know you know it," he called. "What the hell is going on? Jack, this isn't funny. You better let me out right now," I shouted, banging on the door. "Do the goddamn knock, Grace. Do not make a sound. I'm serious. I'll let you know when it's safe. I love you." I've never heard him sound so aggressive. I repeated his knock, and then I heard him walk away. I paced the room. I was worried, but I trusted Jack. I sat by the door for a while, hoping I'd hear something, but there was only silence. I looked out the window afterwards, but all I could see was the house next to ours, and not much else. I decided to take a nap to try and pass the time. I wasn't sure when Jack would be back, and I was getting quite restless. Eventually, I fell asleep. I remember dreaming that I was chained to a bed and was being watched by something. I woke up in sweat. I was tempted to call out for Jack, but I could hear a noise. I walked over to the door slowly and could very clearly hear heavy breathing coming from the other side of the door. I tried to look through the crack under the door, but could only see a dark shadow when I peered through it. Suddenly, I could hear knocks on the door. It wasn't the same special knock that Jack had done. The knocks got louder and louder, and soon it sounded like someone was slamming their whole body against the door. I covered my mouth just in case, but I didn't scream. I looked around the room for something I could use as a weapon, but the spare room was scarcely decorated. I picked up the lamp, hoping it'd suffice. The knocks and slams eventually stopped, and the house again became silent. Completely silent, except for the very distinct and heavy breathing. I stood at the door, ready with the lamp in hand, for what felt like eternity. Then, footsteps. At first, they were moving quickly and quietly, but then became slow and loud. With every thud, they were getting louder and louder, closer and closer. Whoever was there unlocked the door. Then I heard the knock. Jack's special knock.
"You can come out now, Grace."
It didn't sound like Jack though. It actually sounded like someone mimicking Jack. I didn't dare to speak. I stood there, clutching the lamp, holding my breath, saying a silent prayer.
"You can come out now, Grace."
The voice yelled over and over, piercing my ears, and then again, silence. Every so often, I can hear the sounds of chains, and every so often, the footsteps approach the door and do Jack's special knock, and I'm told I can come out. The mimicking is getting closer and closer to the sound of my Jack, but I know it's not him. I know it's not safe. I am not coming out. wife and I have the most amazing little boy. He's only 2, but he's already smart, funny, caring, and generous. We are so blessed to have him in our lives. Natasha and I suffered for years and years of infertility, and I do not use the word lightly. We suffered. Emotionally, physically, and financially. For 10 years, we went to different doctors, poured our hearts, money, even our family's money, and so many hours into starting our family. We endured everything you could think of. Countless bottles of vitamins, drugs, hormone therapy, and procedure after procedure, but everything seemed to fail. We were beginning the adoption process and looking into different agencies when we decided to give it one last shot. We were all in, as my wife liked to say. So what was one more thing to add to the list? It couldn't hurt, could it? Lo and behold, it worked. Just over 9 months later, we had a little boy of our own. He was absolutely perfect. Born April 21, 2017, with dimples just like mine. We immediately fell in love. Postpartum was so hard on her. She was so disappointed she couldn't breastfeed, so she made sure she did everything else, and read every book and blog out there she could find. She did every bottle feeding, every diaper change, wore him around the house like a kangaroo. You name it, she did it. She does a wonderful job, and he is absolutely devoted to her. He just won't call her mom. No other form of mom either. No mama or mommy or even ma. He calls her Tata, which we assume is short for Natasha. It is breaking my heart, and it is slowly breaking my wife's heart as well. I see it in her eyes every time our little man runs at me when I come home from work, shouting "Daddy" as he leaps into my arms. I see her smile fade when my mother comes to visit and he calls her Nana. It isn't that he doesn't love Natasha. He cuddles and plays with her. They sing and have adorable dance routines, even inside jokes that crack both of them up. It is just concerning sometimes, and I know it bothers her especially when we all play together. Sometimes we would be tossing the ball around or something simple as such, and I will go, "Bring the ball to mommy," hoping he will run it over to Natasha. But time after time again, he will run straight to the basement door, look back at us, and smile. It is the strangest thing. He has always done it, and we just can't figure out why. It's not like he knows that is where we buried her. Karen, I think that was her name, his biological mother. He would have no memory of her at all. He only spent 10 minutes downstairs in total once he was born. We immediately brought him upstairs to his new room. In fact, he hasn't been downstairs since the day. He should have no memory of this event. Why won't he just call her mom? I don't know why I did it, but I guess curiosity will eventually catch up to the cat. It started about a year ago with me just watching YouTube videos on my laptop. Nothing serious, just those 4 true scary deep web horror stories type of videos. I found it interesting how possible and realistic all of the stories sounded, and I would watch them every night before I went to bed. Then I moved on to informational videos about how to access the deep web and what software would keep you safe from anyone with bad intentions. I never really considered using any of it, just thought it was something cool to learn about. However, I eventually moved past the initial awe and forgot completely about the ability to access the deep web. Well, about 3 weeks ago, I decided to watch another one of those scary videos, and then I watched a video on how to access the lower levels of the web. I was extremely bored and decided to download the software necessary and planned on just browsing the websites only slightly below the surface web. After about 30 minutes of setting everything up, I realized that some of the software would cost money, and I just decided to say screw it and look around without any protection software. I mean, it's just like the normal web if you don't go anywhere stupid, right? Eventually, I got bored of the normal internet and I found myself on a deep web search page. There were lists of different services, products, and so on. One that really stood out to me was the webcam and security camera website, a place in which anyone could watch whatever was being viewed on many compromised cameras around the world. It just blew my mind. I wish I had stopped there, but curiosity, again, brought out my inner cat. I decided to click on the website and was faced with hundreds of different perspectives, all from different cameras and different countries. I decided that I would come back to the website another time and try to hit the back arrow in the top left corner of my open tab. The page didn't respond, froze for about 2 minutes, and then the entire tab closed. I was a bit confused at what had just happened, but didn't think much of it. This morning, I decided to open up the software yet again, the first time in 3 weeks to be exact, and I navigated my way back to the security camera website. This time, however, it looked much different. Instead of hundreds of different camera streams, there was only one single camera view being displayed. I recognized myself in my room immediately, and as I looked up at the camera on top of my laptop, the image on the screen played back my movement with only a second or two of delay. There were instructions on the screen as well, and I think I've done everything perfectly. You watching this video should be enough time for everything to run its course. I'm sorry, I want you to know that, because you haven't done anything. But I guess life's not fair, and a person as myself knows how to make other people curious. I like your outfit, by the way. It suits your hair color. You might be confused. Don't worry, they'll be in contact soon. I always loved my twin sister, Amy. We were the perfect cliché of identical twins, doing everything together, finishing each other's sentences and playing pranks on people. We had a happy childhood, and for a good few years, everything went fine. It was only in the end of our adolescence that it became clear we weren't going to be two peas in a pod forever. Amy started to hang out with people I didn't like and became troublesome for our parents. We grew apart. I was in school clubs and dating. She was skipping classes, doing God knows what. At only 17, she always smelled of booze and looked tired and stoned. Sometimes the police would bring her home for trespassing or shoplifting. By then, I realized that she didn't have a bright future ahead, but I still loved her with all my heart. The years went by. I went to college, got married, and had a somewhat simple and boring but stable life. Amy was barely able to graduate high school, and was only able to get by because of our parents' pity for her. She was on and off rehab, on and off temporary jobs, on and off with dangerous looking boyfriends. We didn't know what to do about her anymore. I tried so hard to be supportive, but I had my own life to take care of. She always found a way back to her addictions. One day, Amy simply disappeared. She vanished. It was painful and stressful for our family, but we easily accepted that some violent drug dealer got her, and maybe it was for the best to die young instead of keep suffering for a long time. I started to get anxious. I had constant nightmares of being stalked, strangled, or locked up forever. I felt observed at home. My husband and parents told me that I was being paranoid. I was under an extreme amount of stress and was even considering spending some time in a mental ward for my own sake. I've been fighting my whole life to avoid falling into the craziness that runs in the family. Not now, I thought. I'm strong. I can handle this alone. So I agreed with going to therapy and nothing more. After a few weeks missing, Amy was back. She simply showed up at my house like she was never gone. She looked healthier than ever and sane, while I looked like a mess, emaciated from worrying too much, and with huge dark circles under my eyes from avoiding sleep because I was too terrified of the nightmares. I've been stalking you, Alice. I want to start over, but I can't do that under my own skin, so I need yours. At that moment, Amy was more Alice than me. It was astounding. During the few weeks she disappeared, she's been watching me all the time. I don't know how, but she had perfectly mimicked my whole demeanor, my usual haircut, my signature. She was able to convince anyone and everyone that I was her. So, just like that, I was put in a mental asylum for 2 whole years. For 730 entire days, I planned my revenge. I was cautious. I didn't want to actually become crazy. The medication was so strong. Sometimes I was knocked out for days straight. But I had a purpose. I used to love my sister, but she ruined her life, then stole mine. So now I hate her, and now she has to pay. For 2 full years, Amy slept with my husband like she was me. For 2 years, she smiled and cackled when she deserved to be miserable. For 2 years, she had our parents' love all for herself, and they pitied me all together. So, I killed her. I strangled my own sister with my bare hands, buried the body in the backyard, and made a garden above her corpse. I took my place back. I took my life back. The fools didn't notice a thing. Nobody knows. They think Amy is gone for good with some outlaws. She is, somehow. It's all their fault. Am I going crazy like her? Am I losing it? I'll tell you a secret. Now, whenever I look in the mirror, I see my reflection laughing at me. Every time I get a box in my doorstep, my skin crawls. I used to have panic attacks, but now I know that A, the creepy gift will only come on my birthday, and B, it's inevitable. I never had simple pleasures such as waiting happily for something I bought online, or living for many years in the same house. I've been moving every year, and this person still finds me. According to my parents, the macabre tradition started when I was 10. My mother got an unknown box addressed to me, her only daughter, and naturally opened it to check it out. At 45, she literally had a heart attack. But my parents were still able to hide its nefarious contents from me. We moved to another house, and they were the ones to find my creepy gift the next year, yet again. When I turned 12, living in yet another house, I found the box for the first time. Needless to say, it really messed up my head. My parents tried to tell me that it was a sick joke and that the thing was a fake one. For a while I tried to believe it, but it was hard because I had to spend all my birthdays at the police station, and the policeman never addressed that like it was fake. I don't have friends or a boyfriend, and I live in fear. I've been homeschooled after I was 12 and always worked home office. The only thing I ever did outside of my house was going to therapy. My parents are getting too old to move around every year, so I've been living on my own lately. It's fine, as long as my lease and bills are under someone else's name. It makes me feel like I have some control over my life. I legally changed my name twice, but this person still finds me. Happy birthday to me. I'm spending it at the police station yet again, testifying the same thing all over. No, I don't know who this person could be. Yes, I tried setting up cameras, I tried having both policemen and private security at my doorstep to catch them, but it was to no avail. No, nothing out of the ordinary happened to me in the last couple of days, or in any other day of the year for that matter. No one has ever tried to kill me. I never wronged anybody. I never accidentally witnessed a crime. I never did anything that could make a murderer target me. Because this much is pretty clear. My predator is a murderer. Every year, I get a woman scalp. I already got all types of slaughtered females. Old, young, middle-aged, blonde, brunette. This time, it was clear that the head belonged to a very young female. She couldn't have been older than 10. My heart sank. I hate how they always ask twice if I don't have any enemies, if I didn't steal someone's boyfriend. Because that's the first thing that goes to your mind, I guess. Killing someone and sending their head to your rival. There are many things about the situation that are even creepier than the scalps. The first, of course, is that I do my best to hide whenever I move to a new place, but the person doing this always finds me. The second is that the box always has fingerprints of a single person all over it. He or she doesn't even try to hide it. Whenever the police checks them out, there's never a match. As if this person doesn't exist, or it doesn't exist yet. Am I too crazy to consider that my attacker is a time traveler? The third thing is that when the police technicians run the DNA tests on the scalps, they always find the same results. Year after year, the dead female is me. You know that feeling you get when you're alone in the dark? The one that's not there during the daylight, or if there's someone else there beside you. You may have discussed this feeling with your friends, laughed it off as you told them that you found yourself running up the stairs last night, hardly daring but unable to stop yourself, glancing back down into the dark. Everyone knows that feeling. Right now, there's a woman in the basement storage room of her office building, searching through boxes of files with a torch for last year's tax return. The air is very still, but the hairs on the back of her neck are rising as though there's a breeze. She glances back over her shoulder towards the door, but sees nothing. She flicks through the papers a little faster, suddenly desperate for the chatter of the office above her. That moment, for her at least, is endless. There's a young man walking home from the bus stop, down a short path enveloped by trees. It cuts 5 minutes from his journey, and he always takes it without thinking. But once he's on the path, out of the soft orange glow of the streetlights, he regrets his decision. Every whisper of the wind, every rustle of the leaves makes him cast his eyes back behind him. In another minute or so, he will emerge onto the street and forgotten about this feeling completely until next time. Somewhere else, there's a girl in the shower washing her hair. This is usually a mundane task that she completes with barely a thought. But tonight, she's alone in the house and something is different. She keeps opening her eyes, soap burning through her retinas, to confirm that the bathroom is still empty. She feels exposed in a way that she never does when her parents are downstairs watching the television. Unseen, but their presence is still known. Another one in the living room of a shared flat. The flatmate left an hour ago or so. Through an archway in the corner of the eye is the dark, empty space of the kitchen. They realize that their eyes keep drifting over to that space until they are staring wide-eyed at the blankness. They lick their lips, thirsty. They do not venture into the dark kitchen for a much-craved glass of water. People have tried in the past to isolate and examine that feeling, find a reason for its being, explain it away with science and comforting, natural logic. They've all failed, of course. The feeling is not natural because what it perceives is not natural. You always tell yourself that you're just being paranoid and that it's just the leftover spooks from that last horror movie you watched. But I'm afraid that feeling is very real. It's primal and it knows. It puts you on high alert because it senses danger. And the eerie feelings come from not being able to perceive it with your first 5 senses. Of course, there's an easier way of describing this feeling. This thing that comes over you in the dark, empty spaces you find yourself in from time to time. It's me. Now, turn off the light, will you? Freddy wasn't your typical 13-year-old. He was an asshole. If he wasn't in his bedroom screaming at video games, he was scaring his 7-year-old sister. Every traumatizing prank he pulled on little Anna would be worse than the last. Once, he even told her that their mother had been murdered and covered the kitchen floor with ketchup for maximum effect. He was the reason she was so unstable. She would often tell their mother that she had heard whispers and had even seen ghosts wander around the house at night. Freddy would giggle at that, almost proud of the damage he had done. But unfortunately for Anna, it was never enough for him. He felt compelled to break her completely. The storm had kept Freddy awake that night. Restlessly, he tossed and turned in boredom. For a while, he tried to count sheep, but even that didn't help. In defeat, he laid mindlessly, watching the raindrops slide down his window. Lightning flashed suddenly, illuminating his entire room. It was soon followed by a deafening boom. Freddy smiled. He knew what was then to come. Freddy heard his sister crying through the wall, closely followed by a faint pitter-patter as she ran to their mother's room. This was it, his moment of fun. He crept down the hallway and into Anna's bedroom. He prowled around her room like a serial killer, studying every inch of it. Countless ideas rushed through his mind. Then he saw the closet. Freddy waited in the dark for what seemed like forever, peering through a small gap between the closet doors. He had decided that when his sister returned and settled into bed, he would begin to whisper. Then, once she was completely terrified, he would burst out and run at her, screaming at the top of his lungs. He had almost lost all hope and was about to leave when he heard the footsteps approaching. His mother opened the bedroom door, and Anna slowly shuffled in. She was sucking her thumb and dragging her favorite blanket behind her. As she crawled into bed, Freddy couldn't help but grin in excitement. Freddy watched in silence as their mother tucked Anna tightly into bed, planted a big kiss on her forehead, and finally said goodnight. He waited anxiously until he heard his mother's door close before beginning. This is it, he thought, shaking in delirium. The moment I break her. Anna, Freddy whispered hauntingly. She didn't respond. Anna, he continued. Still no response. I'm in the closet, Anna. Come play with me, he harshly croaked. Not tonight, Lucy, Anna calmly replied. Freddy frowned in confusion. She must be sleep-talking, he thought. Wake up, Anna. It's not. A hand reached out from behind him, pulled Freddy back in the darkness, and clutched over his mouth with a cold, tight grip.
She said, not tonight.
I'm a young man in my 20s. The typical kind, you would say. I had a girlfriend until she was killed in her own room, thousands of miles away from me. I witnessed everything over Skype. It was a late autumn afternoon. I sat down on the couch with my laptop and pressed call on Skype. Me and my girl, we had been in this relationship for longer than most people would expect from a pair of millennials living on the opposite side of the globe. The Skype thing, for us, was kind of a scheduled daily ritual that bridged the distance and sustained the love. A healthy habit, if you may. The ringing tone stretched out into what sounded like millennia. I smiled, getting ready to greet her blissful face, always too close to the camera. That was what was special about her. A certain clumsiness and innocence oozing out of every little thing she did. From the big brown sparkly eyes, from the unknown baby hair, from the killer smile that... My thoughts were violently interrupted when a masked figure appeared on the call window. I yelped, but the deep dark stare from behind the eye cutouts stayed undisturbed. It looked unapologetically at the camera, then slowly backed up, letting the whole scene be captured. My heart tensed. My girlfriend was lying on her bed, motionless. The masked thing grabbed her and jerked her head up to look straight at me. Its finger pointed at the bloody mess that now covered the entire room, then moved up to its lips in a shushing gesture. The brutality of the scene paralyzed me in my seat. I covered my mouth with my hands to stop myself from vomiting. My eyes stayed fixed and frozen on the surreal sight in front of me. A silent scream was lost amid the vortex of emotions inside my brain. The masked killer dropped my girlfriend's head, winked at me, then quietly backed out of the room. Silence. I was left there staring at a corpse of the girl I loved, lying on the bed that turned crimson from her blood. A physical metaphor for the bed of roses I once promised her. I guess you get what you deserve, I thought bitterly and pressed end call. I sipped my coffee, satisfied, not letting my guilt take over the pleasure. I gave myself a 10 out of 10 for such a genius plan of hiring an assassin to murder my cheating girlfriend. All I needed to do was to pick up the phone and call her local police station, and to play the role of the distraught witness thousands of miles away. The phone rang as I reached for it. Mildly perplexed, I took the call.
Hey, it's me. It looks like someone is with her. A man. Probably her new you-know guy. You have to postpone the surprise party today. Speak later,
said the distorted voice of the assassin I hired. The headaches were there in the beginning. I remember the pain better than I remember my first words or my first day at school. Mom used to say, "Donnie Gladfield, you think too much. You'll stress yourself out." But despite my greatest attempts, despite meditation, alcohol, smoking, all the good and bad you can name as an escape, the tension at the top of my skull never went away. My first doctor wrote it off as a psychological issue, but I wasn't psycho anything. The pain, for me, was all too real. I happened to be clever, an overachiever. The advice given by parents and teachers was to not be so hard on myself. I was doing great already. I took their advice at face value. I learned to live with it. By the time 28 rolled around, I was used to the pain. I had my own place. I was dating a girl. I had a good job. The tension was part of who I was. In fact, something about being in this state of despair made me work harder. It made me want to prove that the pain meant something. Almost as if I had rid myself of the burden. Dana and I decided to start a family. It had been both of our dreams. A family would make us happy. We tried so hard. This time, the doctor said that I had to relax, that the stress was harming our chances. Several months later, Dana left me. She said I was miserable. I was. She said I needed to get myself sorted. I needed to get rid of whatever I was holding on to. I needed help. All I wanted was to live a normal life. This time, I was put in line for an MRI in my local. The pain had never been worse. What had once been an ache in my skull had spread to my neck and shoulders. The doctor stared at his computer screen, sweat beading across his forehead. "I'm not sure how to say this," he said. "Spit it out, Doc." The doctor paused. "You have a tumor at the base of your skull." "That's not all," the doctor said. "It's growing hair, teeth, arms, and legs. It's been living inside of you for God knows how long." I swallowed, trying to process what he just said. "Its fingers have been preying away at the inside of your skull for what looked like years." "We've got days, maybe hours, Mr. Gladfield. We must act." The pressure at the top of my head increased. There was a sharp prick from inside the skin, and a warm dribble rolled down the back of my neck. I think it's finally coming out. I hate my hair. It's so plain and boring. Mousy brown and poker straight. The only thing it has going for it is its length, which is midway down my back. Still, it's impossible to put it in any other style than the one I've been sporting since I was 12, loose and parted in the middle. Plain hair framing a plain face, which is why on a Friday evening I'm sitting cross-legged on my bed, listening to Stevie Wonder records and idly running a brush through my hair, instead of being on a date like my doormate Rachel, who is blonde and bosomy. Sighing and tossing the brush aside, I pull on a cardigan and go out for a walk along the campus. Outdoors is dusky and tepid, with a gentle breeze lifting the strands of hair I so loathe. My head is down as I walk to avoid anyone I might know. I'm just not in the mood for any interaction. And that's when I bumped into him. I can hear the thumps of books falling on the ground. Immediately, I bend down to retrieve them. Apologies tumbling from my lips. I'm so sorry. Wow, he's good looking. Really good looking. Unlike the boys I've seen around here. Thick, dark hair. Great bone structure. So well dressed. Oh my god, now I really feel bad. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. His voice is smooth and deep, with a faint accent I can't quite place. I'm the one who thought I could carry all of these books with just one arm. I don't realize that I'm still holding onto the books until he reaches for them. Here, let me. I'm not sure where my boldness is coming from. I don't socialize with boys all that much. But despite him being the best looking guy I've ever seen, my ability to talk is as easy as breathing. Where are you headed? I can carry these for you if you like, so you don't drop them again, I said. His smile is knee-weakening. I would like that, very much. I'm just heading to my car, he said, jerking his head in the direction of the parking lot. On the way there, he complimented my hair. I responded by blushing and dropping my head so it falls in my face like a curtain, telling him how much I hated it. Well, I think it's just lovely, and I believe him. We reach his Volkswagen Beetle, still feeling bold as I watch him unlock his car. I say, I'm Sabrina, by the way. What's your name? Theodore. He opens the door and turns to look at me. This time, his smile is accompanied by an odd hardness in his eyes. But you can call me Ted. Good deeds really don't go unpunished, huh? I thought to myself, staring at the symbols on my left hand. All I did was help an elderly woman carry her baggage to her car. It was just a random act of kindness. I wasn't expecting anything in return. I wasn't expecting her to tell me that I was going to die. I wasn't expecting a timer to appear on my hand to keep track of it. The old woman then said this before she left. You should be thankful, young man. Humans become complacent in life, falsely assuming that their lifespan will be long and healthy, unknowing that their times can be much shorter than they think. By revealing your untimely death, I've given you the opportunity to avoid that path. Live your remaining life to the fullest. Live without regrets. The timer was the only thing keeping my denial in check. Nobody else could see it but me. It took a few days to accept this fact, but eventually I took action. With 21 days left, knowing my death gave me enough courage to confess to my crush in college. I was unceremoniously rejected. In hindsight, I guess being rejected was the better option than being in a couple for just a few weeks. With 13 days left, I've been volunteering to be a dog walker for the shelters. I've done this enough times that they get excited when they see me in the shelter. If I had enough time, I would have adopted one. With 5 days left, I've gotten pretty close with my younger sister. This took a while, as she considered my change of attitude towards her very suspicious. Couldn't exactly tell her, nor my parents, that I was passing away soon, with no proof to show. Eventually, she opened up to me, and made me realize how little I actually knew about my younger sibling. And now, here I am, just a few minutes before midnight, before my last day starts. I've already went to the bank to make sure my sister inherits my accounts. I've written a note for my parents to see, explaining my situation and how much I love them. Everything was set. As I was getting ready for bed, my phone started to vibrate. It was an emergency alert message from the government. Emergency. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration has reported that a Vesta-level asteroid is heading towards Earth. The asteroid is said to impact Earth within 24 hours. It was raining, I think it was, or maybe my face was soaked from my own unrelenting tears. There were a few people present at my father's funeral. He wasn't well liked, but he always tried to please others. I was just there for closure. He made me miserable. Sighing heavily as the last clumps of dirt were packed atop his grave. I lowered my head and touched the headstone, leaning down to say goodbye again, to voice how I will never forgive him for all the emotional abuse. A searing, pulsating pain on the right side of my head. Then, darkness. I'm in a cramped place. I can barely move. What the? There's someone here. I dig through my pocket to use my phone to see where I am. It makes no sense. I look around and scream. I'm in the casket. Atop my father. Then, movement. Light goes on. The fabric on the lid seems to glow. My heart is thudding in my head. Panic grips my entire body. I move the fabric aside to see a screen. I gingerly touch it as clicking and motorized sounds from all around me fill the small space. I fell? Like falling off the edge of a mattress on the ground. My father's body is gone. The screen flickers as my father's face comes into focus.
My dear Ava, my body has been shattered by this disease, but I've been offered another chance. But, it comes with a price. Blood for blood. I made a deal with the devil. You were destined to do many good things. Your spirit is pure. The devil offered my life in exchange for yours.
My eyes widen in terror.
You won't be dragged to hell, no, but you will live out the short remainder of your time in this casket. As long as the oxygen lasts. Maybe that is of small comfort.
I screamed and pounded the lid in panic, fully knowing that it was pointless. That bastard. This can't be real, I thought.
The body wasn't mine, but a fake made to be a placeholder, so that suspicion do not arise. You deciding to have a funeral with a closed casket did help to avoid any questions.
I sobbed. I screamed. Then I remembered my phone. I tried to call my fiancée, who went to wait in the car. No signal.
I do feel badly, Ava dear, that this is the only way. As a precaution, a signal jammer has been concealed in the hardware outside the casket. And
my vision blurred. My chest felt tight. Slamming the screen with his vile face made his voice shudder when the device turned off. Darkness. Silently, I cry, knowing no one will find me. Despair. I sob quietly as the air feels thicker. I gasp until the sweetness of oxygen becomes less and less. And then I just feel... Stop whining, I hissed. You're going to do whatever it takes to repay Miss Clover for the damage you caused. He'd thrown, or kicked, or batted a baseball through her front window pane, obliterating framed photographs, piano keys, candlesticks, and tiny crystal animals. Thousands of dollars of damage. It was just his latest calamity. I gave the doorbell another poke. What will she make me do though? Whined James. Clean up the mess you caused, for starters. Then, I don't know. Maybe some weeding up back, helping unload groceries, polishing shoe leather, whatever she needs help with. Finally, Miss Clover's silhouette peered through the frosted glass of the front door. Prayed it open cautiously, craning her neck past the door jamb. So sorry again, Miss Clover, I said, poking James forward. But James is here to make things right. She held her head high, literally looking down her nose at him. Is that right, James? She asked. James looked at me. You can answer yourself, I prodded. He gazed up at Miss Clover. Yes, ma'am. She allowed him the hint of a smile, cast the door wide, and ushered him in. I'll be back at 5, I called. I'm not sure Miss Clover heard me over the slamming front door. I arrived a bit late, but I figured it might serve James well to prolong his torture a few minutes. It took 3 or 4 rings for Miss Clover to materialize, but when she did, she looked very pleased. Has he repaid his debt? I joked. Oh, she sighed. There's still work to be done, but James was very helpful. Mind if I take a look at the state of things? I asked. Please, she answered, beckoning me into the parlor. The place looked immaculate. All the crystal creatures had been swept up, pictures framed, candlesticks replaced. 2 of the piano keys, I noticed, were still cracked and broken. These were ivory, weren't they? I asked. Alas, yes, Miss Clover answered. I can grind up a good replacement. I've still got an old molding. It won't be quite the same as ivory, though. Shame, I nodded, frowning in solidarity. Is it alright if I take James home then? For today, at least. Oh yes, she said brightly. I think he's given everything he can. You may want to wait a spell though. He's still icing his gums. I halted mid-step. His what? Daddy? I heard James call, a noticeable lisp in his voice. He bolted into the parlor, his face puffy and red. He wrapped his arms tight around me. What did you do to him? Miss Clover furrowed her brow. I took what was owed, she said. It was then that I noticed the bronze-plated plate beside the piano bench, the heavy iron pliers inside, and there, in a cluster at the bottom of the bucket, 20 pearly white milk teeth, some still pink with blood. I sipped my white wine and waited for the next speed date. These short, sweet, and simple interactions were just what I needed after finally getting rid of my god-awful nightmare of a husband once and for all. There were plenty of better fish in the... Wait, here swims one now. He was kind of short and certainly older than my 36 years young, but his stride was confident and his smile easy. "Reba?" he asked. "Henry," I replied, shaking his offered hand. He sat down.
"So, what do you do?"
"I sell life insurance," I recited, slightly disappointed by his generic opener. "You?"
"I'm a psychic."
"Oh," I perked up. "That's different."
"Reading people's lives and futures? It certainly is."
"I see. And are you reading me right now?" Is he being honest or just flirting? I wondered. He smiled mysteriously.
"If you like."
He put his hands palm up on the table. They were surprisingly weathered and scarred. This was moving quite fast, but I guess it was speed dating after all. I took his hands. He closed his eyes.
"You drive a red car. Your company starts with a G. You have 3 siblings. You're 36.
He opened his eyes. I removed my hands.
"Well?"
I leaned back, sipped my wine, and considered my words. "That's very good, Henry, and quite correct. However, I don't really know you, and that sort of information can be easily reached these days. So you'll forgive me if I'm a bit skeptical." He smirked.
"I'm glad you said that,"
he said softly. I glanced at the wall clock. "Oh, why?" This time, he didn't take my hands and kept his eyes open.
"When you were 6, you caught a spider and released it into your friend's bedroom as a prank. Unfortunately, the spider was poisonous. Your friend was bitten, and he almost died. You kept this a secret, and he still doesn't know you did it."
I stared at him in shock as memories came flooding back. I had never told anyone that story. Before I could reply, he continued.
"Also, you're still married, but separated from your husband."
My whole body tensed. This wasn't fun anymore. "Well, he was an abusive asshole, but you already knew that, right?" I said.
"Is that why you asked your sister to hire someone to kill him?"
Cold fear immediately gripped my stomach. I could barely breathe. How did you...
"Because, Miss LeGoff,"
he said, leaning forward.
"I am the man she hired."
His face twisted into a smug leer. "What do you want?"
"Well, do you remember the handsome fee you paid for my services? After meeting your husband, a fascinating man with many amusing stories, he offered me double that amount to kill you. So what I want to know is, do you have an even better counter-offer for me?"
Panic tore through me. "Please, sir, I don't..." What are you afraid of? What chills you to your very core? We all have one thing. Is it dark? A blackness so pure that you can't see your hand in front of your face? Could you last being lost in the woods, hiding from both the known and unknown, wondering if you'll ever make it home? Are you afraid of ghosts? Does the idea of demons and spirits make you nervous? Or maybe it's just people, killers, sick, twisted psychopaths that want to make you scream. Not sure? We'll figure it out for you. What are you waiting for? Click here. This was the advertisement Monday night on my Instagram feed. My closest friends and girlfriend clicked and filled out a short quiz that followed. I wasn't really interested. I was never too big on those online quizzes. When my friend Chris, the arrogant son of a bitch he was, filled it out, he told me it was retarded. He never admitted to being afraid of anything. After he completed the quiz, he received an email simply saying, "Thank you, your results are pending." Nothing ever came. Sam, my girlfriend, also filled out a quiz. She's obsessed with online quizzes, even the stupid ones like "What kind of squirrel are you?" She received the same email and was pretty bummed out when she was left hanging. My best buddy, Joe, took the quiz since he loved all things horror. He had the biggest collection of horror movies that I've ever seen. Same email. This all happened Monday. It's Friday now. 2 days later, a video spread all over social media showing Chris pissing himself while passed out, drunk at a party. He hung himself that night in his garage with an extension cord. Sam's mom had a psychotic break and has been tied to her bedpost since Wednesday. They called a priest and he's been with her ever since. Her family doesn't want to go public, but they believe she's been possessed. What must be Joe was found in his bedroom, at least what was left of him. Pieces of flesh were strewn all about his room, bloodstain all over the walls. His head was removed, and a grisly cut was made straight down the center. Cops found a chainsaw covered in blood at the end of a trail of footprints, leading from his bedroom through the house out into the backyard. I didn't take the quiz when they did, but the next night I couldn't sleep. I took the quiz. My results are pending. The bar was closed, and Morris hadn't had a bite all night. Maybe he was getting picky, or maybe the city was just running dry for an old fox like him. All the pretty and dumb girls hunted to extinction. No, there were always others. He pulled out his phone, perhaps to prove it to himself. There were more bars, after all. Secret places that stayed open all night. He just needed a ride. The first and only ride offered made his heart go pitter-patter.
"Amanda,"
he said out loud, chewing each syllable like a last meal. No stars, no history. A little lamp, all alone on a Tuesday night. She was there in 2 minutes, driving a little green Japanese thing and waving through a tinted window. Morris helped himself, diving into the passenger seat.
"Lovely night, isn't it, Amanda?"
The girl frowned, her eyes dancing over so slightly in her skull. "I think you're supposed to be in the back seat."
No, I get sick in the back."
She was small and maybe a little plump for his taste, but the face was good. The face was just his type. "Okay," she said. "Should be there in 5 minutes."
Take your time.
said Morris. The car was cramped, but it would do. Spacious enough for what he needed.
First night?
The girl considered the question. "Just new to this app,"
Oh, of course.
said Morris with a laugh.
What color are your eyes, Amanda? They're quite striking.
The girl flinched, unconsciously turning her head away. "You think so?"
I do.
said Morris.
And I meet a lot of girls, but hardly with any eyes like that.
"But some?" Now Morris flinched, more out of surprise than anything.
One or two.
The girl nodded. "My sister has eyes just like me."
I wouldn't mind meeting her, then. I bet she's just as pretty as...
Morris looked out the window. He hadn't been paying attention to the road, only Amanda.
I think you're going the wrong way.
They pulled to a stop outside of an abandoned warehouse. "You've already met my sister," said the girl, killing the engine. "I don't think you've met the rest of my family, though." 5 men came out of the warehouse, followed by 2 women. The men carried baseball bats and big, heavy wrenches. The women looked just like Amanda, an older version and a slightly younger version, both with those same striking eyes. "I wasn't sure which app you used, so I signed up for all of them," said the girl.
You know, I could have killed her.
said Morris, voice raising as the panic slowly crept in.
I didn't though.
The man reached the car, yanking open the passenger side door. "Don't worry," said the girl as they dragged the screaming Morris out onto the pavement. "We won't make that same mistake." "It's not the cheating that bothers me, Jim," said my wife, "and it's the lying. I just want you to be honest with me, all the time, even when it hurts. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said, "I promise." But I was lying. And then she died, and in the years since then, I didn't sleep with a single woman. Ironic, right? Also, after that year, I became sure that Anne was visiting me. I felt her presence. I smelled her perfume. So strongly, it's like it was sprayed directly at my face. My birthday was coming up, and Lucy, our 7-year-old, was making me a special present. It was top secret, apparently. Every day after school, she locked herself in her room and worked on it until dinner time. I had absolutely no idea what she was doing in there. Occasionally, I heard her talking faintly through the door, but mostly it was dead quiet. However, she was extremely serious about keeping it a secret. She reminded me daily not to look. I told her I wouldn't. "Do you promise?" she would ask intensely. Then she'd stare at me with her sharp eyes, her mother's eyes.
Yes,
I would say.
I promise.
But after 2 weeks, I felt I had to step in. Something just wasn't right anymore. So when she was at school, I searched every inch of her room for her project, but I found absolutely nothing. It was so strange, but I decided to just monitor the situation. Finally, it was my birthday, and I have to admit, my curiosity was piqued. After breakfast, She made me sit on her bed with my eyes closed. Then I heard her knock 3 times on something, pause, then open it. It sounded like her closet. She repeated this over and over, but also seemed to grow more and more frustrated. I had no idea what the hell she was doing, but she refused to let me open my eyes. Eventually, she threw herself onto the bed. The closet door was open. "It's not working," she cried. Then she looked up at me accusatorily. "You must have looked. Did you look?" I felt guilty.
No,
I told her.
I never looked.
"Do you promise?"
Yes.
Eventually, she told me the truth. "I've been trying to bring Mommy back from the dead." Cold chills entered me.
What? What do you mean?
Eleanor told me to. I gaped at her. Eleanor was my wife's middle name.
Who's Eleanor?
I asked. She pointed at her laptop. My stomach dropped. I reminded her about not talking to strangers online. She tried to show me some chats, but they were gone. We tried to find Eleanor, but she had vanished too. After that day, the visits from my wife stopped. As time passed, I couldn't help but wonder, crazy as it might sound, what would have happened if I kept my promise? What would have happened if I hadn't looked? It started around puberty. The defiance, the swearing, locking his bedroom door, playing loud music. I don't know when he started using drugs. He didn't even have money to keep up with that habit, so he started selling them. Then he started stealing. I tried talking to him, but he wouldn't listen. Sometimes he shouted over me or raised his fist. His stepfather, Bill, intervened once and wound up with a black eye. It was ruining our marriage. Bill spent long days outside, driving the fields over and over with harrows, loosening up dirt for planting. We barely talked. We were never intimate. So, when I found Joey's note on the counter last Friday, announcing he'd gone to live with his father, as much as I was upset, I was also relieved. Bill rubbed my back while I sobbed, and it was me, not him, that said, maybe this is for the best. I put Joey out of my mind as best as I could for the weekend. And it worked. I actually found myself smiling for the first time in months. On Monday, I decided to call his father to make sure that he had arrived all right, make sure he was eating, make sure he wasn't in jail already.
The little shit never came here,
his father said. I collapsed on the floor.
What do you mean?
Bill asked, as startled as I was. I called the police, I called the hospitals, I even called the fire department. Their calmness in the face of my despair was maddening. Finally, I tried calling Joey. It rang endlessly. Then it went into voicemail. "I'm not here, so F off," said my son's recorded voice.
Leave him a message,
Bill suggested.
He'll call back soon, I'm sure.
But I needed to talk to him now. I called again and again. On probably the 10th call, I began to hear something. It was faint, but I could swear I heard Joey's phone ringing. Somewhere in the distance, he must have been squatting out in one of the old barns on the property, where we sorted hay and farm equipment.
It's raining, Mary,
Bill called after me. He hadn't heard the ringing. I kept redialing every time it went to voicemail. I followed it backward and forward across the horse paddocks, louder here, quieter there, listening intently to figure out where it was coming from. I expected to be drawn towards one of the barns, but instead I found myself circling back over and over to a specific spot in the middle of an empty field, to some freshly churned soil where Bill had been planning to plant. I dialed again and lowered my ear to the dirt. I could hear the phone ringing, louder than anywhere else. Bill, I saw, had caught up to me. "Bill?" I began, my voice shaky. "Did you?" He swallowed hard, not meeting my gaze. Silence, and then Bill looked at me and said,
He was tearing us apart.
Nobody in that small town ever respected Harry. But all that changed with a simple ingredient. No one ever liked Harry when he was a little fat kid on the playground, or when he was an even fatter kid in high school. They certainly did not when he dropped out to go to culinary school. No one would ever believe you if you told them that they would worship him one day. No one knows where Harry went for a few years, but when he returned, he opened up a diner right in the center of town. Within a year, it was the only thing people talked about. Everyone ate there. Ask anyone, and they would tell you why. Harry's Diner has the best damn food. Simple as that. It really was. People loved it. Ate it by the pound. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Harry's, and Harry's. It became an obsession. Some people even started setting up camp outside, just so they could be the first in line for breakfast. Harry's got so popular that he put the supermarket out of business. The other restaurants closed soon as well. No one was too bothered by that. Everyone who worked at those places just started eating at Harry's. That was only the beginning. People loved that food so much, they would do anything for Harry. One woman traded her firstborn child for a week of free meals. Harry made another man kill his best friend just because he could. It wasn't long before Harry had a whole army that would do anything just for the taste of what he would cook up next. Nowadays, there's not much left of that town, other than Harry's, of course. All of the homes are worn and faded. The grass grows unchecked, and trash sits out at the curb. People wander the streets in haze, waiting for their next meal. The town even gave Harry access to their tornado siren. Its wailing song signals the next feast. At night, the whole ruin of the town basks in the neon light from the diner sign. Harry's name proudly looking down over its subjects, a whole kingdom to call his own. He deserved it. After all, he really did have the best damn food. Simple as that. But it wasn't because of salt, pepper, or paprika. Not because of the cheese or the butter, either. Not even because of the factory frozen meat he used. It was the heroin he laced it with. I've been having blackouts for almost a year now, but no one seems to notice. The first time was at my 16th birthday party my family threw for my cousin, Adam. His dad got him a DVD of a horror movie he loved, and we decided to watch it since only Adam had seen it before. I was really looking forward to watching that movie, but then I fell asleep just when it was getting started. When I woke up, the end credits were rolling. Everyone was talking about their favorite parts of the movie. Dennis was more into it than any of us, Adam said about me, and at the same time I assumed it was a joke. For a while, I thought I was just falling asleep at strange times. Then, in geography class, I blacked out like I always did. When I woke up, however, I looked down to see a page full of notes on the lesson, all in my handwriting. It was like I wasn't actually gone, just running on autopilot. I tried to keep track of when I blacked out to see if I could figure out what could be causing it. But then, I'd fall asleep and wake up to find my records missing or destroyed. I'd take notes on my arm, fall asleep, then find them scrubbed away. Someone, or something, was trying to stop me from understanding it. I could feel myself losing grip on reality, and I didn't think anyone would believe me. Eventually, I figured it out. The pattern was both simple and cruel. Anything that felt refreshing was being taken away from me. Anything that relaxed and recharged me was being stolen. I would get the physical benefits of downtime, but not the experience. My stomach would be full after a blackout, but I did not get to enjoy the meal. It made my life absolutely miserable. Yesterday, I finally broke down and told Adam everything while I was at his house. We were hanging out while our parents were at the movies, and then he asked me if something was wrong. I just lost it. I told him that I was having a breakdown, and he offered to help. Adam called our parents, but none of them answered. We knew what theater our parents were at, so we decided to take the bus there, tell our parents what was going on. We took our seats on the bus, and Adam put a hand on my shoulder. "We'll figure it out, Dennis. Don't worry." I was so relieved, I could barely hold back my tears. I finally reached out for help, and someone was actually there for me. Then, I closed my eyes, just for a moment, and he was gone. I was on a bus, but it wasn't the same one. It was the only passenger. I looked down at my arm and saw something written on it in my own handwriting. "They will never find him. Do not make me do that again." Many of the applicants came into our program with a romanticized idea of police work. Many envisioned an elegant battle of wits against wine-swelling criminal masterminds. Many others were former high school bullies who were mostly interested in busting in some heads. They didn't take my work as a coroner too seriously. For them, a corpse was a clue to be sliced open and tossed aside. But Bethany was different. She saw the cadavers as the people they had been, worthy of respect. She would whisper to them while she worked, telling them the latest news they missed out on, or how grateful she was to learn from them. Some of the students found it a bit off-putting, but to me, it was endearing. And she always knew what she was doing. which tools to use, how to extract the organs properly, how to sew the lips shut, and so on. It came as no surprise then to learn that she had been a mortician's daughter. She worked with her dad in some quaint rural village, prettying up the bodies for funerals. He had been something of a public servant as well, being the only mortician for miles around, she told me. He would often offer his services for free to people who had died without family, and would stage a public viewing regardless of whether anyone came to visit the deceased. He sounded like a kind-hearted man, and I longed to meet him. I wondered if he shared his daughter's sense of gallows humor, an important tool for people who thrive in circumstances that would otherwise engender despair. Today, we were discussing the process of decomposition and the weird things a body may do post-mortem. We'd already discussed coffin births and angel lust. Look them up if you dare. So I decided to end on a lighter note. Corpse might blow it up with gas, and that gas needs to escape somehow, I said, pausing for a dramatic effect. Corpse fart, in other words. The students laughed, dispelling some of the tension in the room. Bethany raised her hand. The gases sometimes escape in other ways too, up past the vocal cords, so sometimes it sounds like they're moaning. It was true that corpse sometimes moaned, and it was always unexpected and terrifying. But then Bethany continued. Sometimes, she said, they even sound like they're screaming. The other students cast each other sideward glances. Screaming? Impossible. The vocal cords tighten when a person screams, which requires an electrical impulse from the brain, and corpse are brain dead. Bethany, please. These kids are not the brightest, and they don't know you're joking. Everyone laughed. Who's joking? She asked, deadpan. I smiled, trying to think of a quick and smart comeback. But then she added, without a hint of humor, it happened all the time when I worked in my dad's basement. Everybody has moments like this. I'm sure you've had many yourself. A chance encounter, a fleeting glimpse, a split second where you think, maybe I should, perhaps I gotta. And many times when you've thought, I wish I had just, when it's been too late, the moment is gone. And then you mentally beat yourself for hesitating. Curse at yourself for being the type of person who takes too long to think. So long that when a decision has been made, it becomes null and void because the reason behind the decision no longer matters. I used to be like that. And then I decided to never again be indecisive. No longer shall I be the person to walk by someone in need and have an argument with myself in my head, all the while hoping someone else would take the matters out of my hands. Good Samaritans. There's nearly always one around when the need is great. I try to be the Good Samaritan now. Like right now, standing beside this young man, standing on the bridge, tears in his eyes. Every now and then, he mumbles to himself, says he's no good, tells himself that things would be better if he wasn't around. I talk to him, try to say the right things, comfort him. I try to make sure not one word I say will convince him to take the next step. I feel like he doesn't hear me, but I remind myself that he has a lot on his mind. Too much. I'll keep trying though. Maybe just one sentence will break his trance. Just a few words. Just one word. The word that might make everything feel alright again. Feel like hope again. It's a shame it's late at night. A shame there's no one else to help him. Help me. I've been standing with him for nearly an hour now, and I'll carry on standing here, trying to say the right things, but I know he cannot see me. I'm a ghost, a phantom, just a tingling of lingering energy, buzzing right here at the spot I took one step too many 4 years ago, just like this young man. It's a shame. I wish I could really help him. Slowly, as he grips the railing, he lifts his leg and pulls it back over and onto the safety of the path. He looks down into the abyss, then turns towards me. Surely you can't see me, but he whispers, "Thank you," then turns and walks away. We live in the same day over and over. Literally, October 23rd, 2018. The day starts at 6 a.m. PST. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. The day goes for 16 hours, and then you fall asleep. When you wake up, everything is reset. Everything except your memory. Everyone gets to keep that. For the first few weeks, if you can even count these as weeks, everyone was confused. Nobody could figure out what was going on. Most people didn't think it was real. Then came the various theories. God was punishing us, of course. Then people moved on to other things. Everything from aliens to global warming to changes in the migratory patterns of monarch butterflies was blamed. Scientists from all over the world worked hard trying to figure it out. But I guess it's difficult to continue your work when everything keeps getting reset every 16 hours, including things written on paper or saved on disks. There are only so many complicated mathematical situations one can memorize, I guess. Some people started to live a hedonistic life, knowing that there's no tomorrow and therefore no consequences. Some people went the other way and killed themselves, only to be stored to life at 6 a.m. PST. They had no memory of the time they spent dead. Eventually, even the scientists stopped trying, or trying to keep track of the number of todays. People adapted and tried to make some sort of a life with the idea of no tomorrow, and the virtual immortality that came with it. This worked out well for some people, especially the rich, and not so well for others. It was the worst with people like me, who were dying before the loop began. I was diagnosed with stage 5 cancer and given 2 weeks to live. The pain is unbearable at times, and the analgesic don't help that much. Most of the patients in my wing, and I'm sure millions of others with similar conditions, live in constant agony, with no hope of a cure or death to take away the pain. But I try to look at it in a more positive way. Some kind of life is better than none, I think. Lights out, says Nurse Nooks, Must be 9:55 p.m. She's one of the few people who still comes to work every day to take care of people like me. Truly an angel. Some kind of life is better than none, I think again, as I wind the strange golden clock the mysterious woman gave me yesterday and set the hands to 6 a.m. He was an unpleasant man with dark secrets. Ron didn't respond to or read most emails. But this one broke through the haze of drugs and alcohol, catching his bleary eye. $1,000 to spend the night in a haunted house. Make it through 8 rooms of terror and the money is yours. No questions asked. You read that right, Ron. Cypher Entertainment will pay you 10 crisp Ben Franklins to beta test our new Halloween spook house. Be at the corner of 10th and Strip 9 at midnight next Tuesday and see if you have what it takes. Signed, Luther Cypher, Cypher Entertainment. The late fall chill seeped into his tattered army surplus coat as he stood at the corner of 10th and Strip 9, thinking of ways to spend his money. He had visions of drugs and women, lots of both. A sleek black limousine appeared around the corner and flashed high beams. A door popped open and he folded his lanky frame into the plush back seat.
Nice wheels,
he said. There was no response from the smoke glass divider.
Whatever, pisshead,
he said, opening one of the iced beers on display in the back seat.
I could get used to this shit,
he thought. 10 minutes later, the limo pulled up in front of an old Victorian house on the far side of town. The door popped open again, and he slid out into the fog.
Have yourself a nice evening, pisshead.
Up the nondescript stairs and into the dusty-smelling foyer, a door with the number 1 on it immediately appeared to his right. And here we go, he thought. The first room was your standard Halloween house fare. Mannequins and fake blood. A towering lunatic with a chainsaw and canned horror movie sounds over the loudspeaker. Nothing surprising, he pushed through the door marked 2 and entered the darkened room. Immediately, his nostrils were assailed by the thick smell of rot and corruption. Something small and wrapped in bandages lay unmoving in the corner. Something vaguely familiar. He gagged and stumbled through the 3rd door. He found himself in an old apartment, the one he had shared with Beth and little Jimmy. Beth laid slumped in the ratty recliner, a syringe in her arm. Jimmy was cold and turning green, half out of his crib. He lunged for Jimmy, moved to help him, even as he knew the baby was far beyond help, and watched in horror as the crib dissolved and became another door, marked with the number 4. The next 4 rooms were a whirling blur of crying infants, terrible winged creatures that clutched at his clothes, ripped his flesh, and nauseating huge syringes that stabbed at his eyes. Finally, he came upon the door marked 8.
Finally,
he thought. He barely had any strength to push through.
The money, all that money.
As he pushed through the door and entered what lay beyond, the number 8 slowly turned on its side and stopped. Infinity. I had always thought that I was adopted, but Mother and James, he refused to be called father, by the way, told me that I was their little miracle. It wasn't until a bleak morning in May that I was finally bored enough to read the side of a milk carton on our rickety breakfast table. Amanda Price, age 6 when abducted, would now be 15 years old. She was last seen wearing a white t-shirt and purple overalls. If you have any information as to the whereabouts of Amanda Price, please call. I dropped the carton. Milk came flying out in every direction, leaving the room coated in the beverage. I knew I was Amanda. I had to be. I had never felt like a Melissa. I had never seen any photo of Mother pregnant, or a baby book reporting all of my milestones. James always brought me up in fights against Mother. The room spun, and I let the creeping darkness of unconsciousness take me. When I awoke, I scribbled down the phone number on the spilled jug on my arm, wiped up the mess with a paper towel, and headed on my way to school. There was a payphone outside the main office, and I could have some privacy. I tried to explain the situation to the woefully unprepared man on the other end of the line. He offered to pick me up from school so he could take me to my real parents. As someone who never fit in with my family, this was a dream come true. It wasn't until I was back in his shed, shackled and beaten, that I noticed his printer. It was large enough that he could print whatever he wanted to on cardboard. His job as a grocery clerk allowed him to plant whatever images he pleased on the milk cartons. It is only now, as I see my reflection on his knife, that I realize just how much I look like my mother. When I met Jeremy, he was a mess, an endearing mess. In truth, he was basically a hoarder, with mounds of hardcover books where furniture should go, and shoeboxes full of photos from family reunions he hadn't especially enjoyed. He just couldn't part with things, which was sweet in a way, but obnoxious as hell whenever we tried moving from one apartment to another and had to spend a full week repacking his ridiculous DVD collection. We got older and got married, and this stuff just kept growing and growing, until eventually it became a problem we couldn't ignore anymore. We had a baby, a beautiful boy named Harrison, and the towers of stuff became too stressful for me. Our home was dangerous, and I was scared. Jeremy understood. He's always been empathetic and kind, just flawed in this one silly way. Still, I admit I was surprised that first day when Harrison and I came back from the park and there was a noticeable gap in the corner of the house. "Where are your CDs?" I asked.
Digitalize them,
said Jeremy, beaming ear to ear. Stacks and piles of mountains of old CDs, reduced to invisible data.
"I'll do the books next,"
he said. He did, and suddenly it felt like our house was twice as big. It felt almost empty. I never thought to ask about the process. Frankly, I wasn't interested. But the results were incredible. Bit by bit, Jeremy pared down our lives, reducing the physical with the digital. We weren't cramped anymore. We were practically Spartan, torn down to the bare essentials, and everything captured under glass, just a button press away. But then one day, I came home and there was an odd quiet in the house. It took me a moment to realize what was missing. Honey, where's Harrison? I'll always remember Jeremy's face then. He looked so proud and so serene, like he understood something no one else could or ever would. Rather than respond, he held up a tablet. I thought he was showing me a video at first. It was Harrison on a blanket in a bright room, smiling and laughing. But I didn't recognize the blanket or the room, and Harrison seemed to flicker and stutter like he was buffering.
Pretty great, right?
Said Jeremy.
Barely takes up any space this way.
You'd think I would have killed Jeremy then. I wanted to. I really did. But something held me back. I guess it was maternal instinct. Instead, we made a deal. And honestly, it's not so bad down here. At least I have my son, who smiles and laughs, and smiles and laughs, and cannot be touched, and will never grow old. A digital baby in a digital room, forever watched by a digital mother, crying digital tears. And we hardly take up any space at all. Since a very young age, I've occasionally heard this ringing sort of sound in my head. It's a bit like a church bell, though not quite as loud or penetrating a sound. The best way I could describe it is a faint, almost hum-like, in my head. A lot like something you would hear in an old school Zelda game. After some time, I deciphered that I would hear this noise in the event that I was doing something for the last time. Seeing something unique, saying something unique, watching a terrible movie and knowing I'd never watch it again. If I'd say a silly word that doesn't exist, sure enough I would hear, knowing I'd never say that exact word again. At first, it was quite annoying. I would hear it as I visit a new place, as I'd never see any of these strangers again. Fortunately, with some practice and effort, I was able to drown out these rings in favor of those that tend to be louder, denoting a more impactful last time event. As I grew up, I began to hate this curse and quickly fell into depression, saying goodbye to my friends at graduation, only to be inundated with knowing we'd all go our separate ways and never speak again. I'll never forget there. I heard as I say goodbye to my father for the last time, seconds before he peacefully passed away. Not to mention the numerous first dates I've been on, hearing as we finish up the night. This has been years, though. With the help of my beautiful wife and daughter, I've managed to turn the ringing into something positive. I decided to quit my drinking habit, and after many harsh months, I finally heard that as I took my last shot of whiskey. I recently had a Big Mac, only to hear as I put it down, and I've since dropped several pounds. My wife is my biggest supporter, and thus far, the only person I've trusted to tell about this secret. My wife and kid are leaving to spend some much needed quality time together soon.
I love you,
I tell them as they're heading out the door. Everything hurts. My thoughts are scrambled by a droning sound resembling millions of cicadas buzzing around in my head, and my body is broken and destroyed. I'm dying, but the Reaper is taking his time getting to me. My distressed son paces in front of me, holding the shotgun he used to turn everything below my kneecaps into pink mist. He's crying and babbling like a baby, and I don't blame him. If I had chained up and shot my parents in my basement, I would be a mess too.
It's not my fault. I didn't want to do this.
He mumbled to himself.
I needed to do this. I told them not to leave the house for any reason. And what do? They do exactly the opposite of what I tell them.
I know he isn't speaking to me, but it doesn't sound like he's talking in his own words either. He turns and looks at me.
I'm sorry, Mom.
Tears streaming down his face. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out 2 shotgun shells. Under any other circumstances, I would be screaming and pleading for my life. But now, my throat is far too dry to do anything but let out faint wheezes. He takes aim at my head, just like he did with his father yesterday. He had always loved me more. Yesterday, when my son shot my husband, he probably didn't even see him as human. Part of him was likely happy he was killing his dad. After the years of neglect, I can't really blame him. But I was not my husband. Through the years, I filled the void my husband's apathy created. And my son loved me for that. And now, he was going to shoot me in the head.
No!
He screamed as he threw down his gun. I traced him as he walked back and forth in the basement. He was having a change of heart.
You're my mother. I don't know why I thought you would hurt me. I don't know why I'm doing this. I love you, Mom.
He again walks over to me, and I begin to panic. I wanted to tell him to stay away. I wanted to croak out my death wish. I wanted to turn away as he embraced my body in a hug. But I failed. As he kissed my cheek, I unwillingly returned his favor by using the burst of adrenaline and hatred the infection gave me to take a bite out of his face. If my body was still mine, I would have been bawling my eyes out. But my body was no longer mine. And soon, my son's wouldn't be his either. He stumbles back in pain and confusion, beginning to convulse. The infection is taking hold of him. As I fell back, defeated, I cannot feel guilty. All I can feel is the buzzing controlling my broken body, and now, his. I read about it on the internet. Storming Area 51. People wanted to storm Area 51. My eyes lit up at the mere thought of it. Finally someone wants to do this. Storming to uncover the government's secrets. I'm so excited I can barely contain myself. I begin to pack up, trying to grab what I can. The day is approaching fast. The days go by, and they just go by. And soon, it is the day, September 20th. I'm so excited, but nothing happens. No one follows through with it. It was all an elaborate joke. My heart sinks. No one's coming for me. No one is coming to rescue me. Mr. Van Gogh walked with the nurse down a long white hall to an isolated room.
So, what do you guys think is wrong with him?
Van Gogh's voice crept out with confidence. Textbook schizophrenia, of course.
They always think it's schizophrenia. And you're sure you don't mind me going in and talking to him?
If I did, then I wouldn't have walked you all the way out to the solitary confinement annex. Speaking of which, here we are, room A304. You can head on in whenever. I'll be right out here. The nurse let out a strained sigh as he walked in. A boy, 10 or 11 years old, was bound to a chair in the middle of room A304. He showed no interest in the man's arrival. He just sat in the chair and stared intently at the ground.
So, you must be Samson,
he said to the boy. No response.
I'm Dr. Van Gogh.
Still no response.
I hear that you're a very gifted young man, but you're suffering a great deal.
Van Gogh leaned down, eye level with the boy, but the boy did not look up at him.
I can help.
You can't do anything, Mr. Van Gogh.
I can try. All you have to do is explain to me what's going on in your head.
There are 7.5 billion of them. The voices.
What makes you say that?
I listen to them individually. I know them all by name. Then he looked up at the man with piercing grey eyes, including you, Mr. Van Gogh.
Interesting. What else do you know about these voices?
I know what they do. Most of them scroll through the internet and watch reruns of the same TV shows all day. Then there are those that suffer and starve, beg for a chance, or just fall over dead. And then there's you, Mr. Van Gogh, a self-proclaimed doctor that believes so firmly in the supernatural that he is willing to drop out of med school to disprove his peers. The man stood up, at a loss for words.
How could you possibly?
And what you don't know, Mr. Van Gogh, is that I can make the voices stop if I wanted to. I can create new voices in an instant, and I can just as easily silence them. Van Gogh opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He pulled at his throat and collapsed to the ground with a strained sigh. And it takes so little effort, said the boy. Stephanie, he called to the nurse. Mr. Van Gogh isn't breathing. Samson's gaze fell back to the floor, listening to the voices in his head. Yes, I snuffed out her voice too. Anna spoke when she was only a few hours old. 1, 3, 5, 8. At first, her mother thought she imagined it, but her husband heard it too. Then, the infant repeated the words insistently, insinuating as well as one possibly could through a newborn's mouth. 1, 3, 5, 8. This continued until, hands trembling, her father wrote the numbers down. That done, Anna fell silent for a long time. One day, her mother said, "If you don't talk soon, we're going to have to see a therapist." "Don't worry," said Anna. "What?" "I just don't like talking." It was always like this. Anna was withdrawn and sullen, but rarely rebellious. She didn't like expending serious efforts. She would even pretend to be an ordinary child when strangers were around. "So they don't ask questions," she said. When she was 6, her parents were considering a move. They asked her what kind of house she would like to live in. She replied with an address. It was on sale, and it was a good choice. When she was 7, her mother caught her practicing lockpicking. "It makes me feel better," said Anna. They let her keep the picks. As far as they could tell, she didn't mean any harm. When she was 8, her father asked if she could pick stocks as well as she could pick locks. She replied that she could, but she wouldn't. "It doesn't help," she said. When she was 9, they went to an opera. During the intermission, she slipped away from her parents amid the crowd. The building was packed, and it was easy to lose them. Weaving around the crowd, Anna ducked into the back corridors of the theater. Avoiding detection, she picked the lock on the maintenance closet, slipped inside, pulled out her flashlight, and descended into the crawlspace. It was time. The explosives had been rigged quite thoroughly. She didn't need to study the setup now. She knew it all too well. Every one of the bombs was hooked to a single keypad. Getting help here had never worked. Getting the opera cancelled just delayed the inevitable. If they began an evacuation with the show underway, the bomb just went off early. There was only one approach left that held any hope of ending this. And so, grinding her teeth, Anna punched the numbers in. 1, 3, 5, 8. The explosion was mercifully fast, and so Anna had no chance to consciously perceive it. Nobody in the building survived. Anna spoke when she was only a few hours old. 1, 3, 5, 9. If you ever happen to pass through the small town of Glasswood, New Jersey, do yourself a favor and stop by the local farmer's market and pick up an armful of corn. It's the best damn corn you'll find along the East Coast. Known not just for its unparalleled sweetness, but for its unique ruby red hue. Every ear is covered in crimson kernels, saved from a single ivory kernel. That's actually a lot of fun to search for, like a cylindrical Where's Waldo, but it's always there. A little unintended idiosyncrasy of the growing process. Granted, while the white kernel is as edible as the rest of the cob, it's admittedly a bit hard, so you might want to toss it away if you're worried about chipping a tooth. Now, while in town, you're probably going to hear some rumors, which you do well to brush off as the malarkey they are. Glasswood's just a simple farming town, and nothing sinister ever came out of such a place. No, there are no harvest rituals. That is a lie that frankly serves only to undermine the skill of the town's farmers. They grow that fine corn with their own bare hands. Thank you very much. And every town in America's got its share of bright-eyed youth with wanderlust and itchy feet. So don't let the missing children's posters put you off. If there's any oddity about the town, it's that the veggies are so packed with nutrients that kids grow up a bit quicker than most. So sure, A few parents will make a big fuss over a son losing his first tooth, which happens quite often. It's something of a celebration, a coming-of-age ceremony, one might say, and it's plain silly to see any harm in that. In fact, feel free to join in on the evening's festivals, while the young man in question is giving a traditional tour of the local fields. Sadly, tours are not given to visitors. And remember to ignore the occasional crazy old coot with their cardboard signs and nonsensical yarns. You'd have to be off your rocker to give a dime of credence to the absurd idea of blood offerings. Townsfolk have filed multiple complaints against the nuts, but sometimes it can't be helped, and one or two residents just go a little loony every now and then. But every town has its local bad seeds, right? It's just unfortunate that a place like Glasswood, filled with hard workers and the most pleasant folks you'll ever meet, is plagued with such toxic balderdash. So it's best to put it all out of your mind should you find yourself in that little town bordering the Pine Barrens. And friend, I cannot stress this enough. When you're there, don't forget to show Glasswood's hard-working farmers a little appreciation by buying yourself a basket of their ripe red corn. Lord knows they sacrifice so much to make it. I have an imaginary brother. Well, I had one. I'm an only child. I always have been, and always will be. I wanted a brother though, really badly. I asked my mom for one. She didn't say anything, even though I asked her real hard. That's okay though, because I could make my own. My imaginary brother was tall and strong. He carried me on his shoulders and made me super tall. He smiled at everything I said and was such a good listener. He never talked to me, but I could tell he loved me a whole lot. I told my mom about him, and she dropped something. She was quiet like usual, but then she yelled at me. She made me say I was an only child. I always had been, and I always will be. She made me say it over and over again, and held my wrists till they hurt. I kept my imaginary brother a secret after that. He was so easy to think about. Sometimes I could see him holding my hand and almost felt it. Sometimes, late at night, I see him watching me, and he looks sad. Something is sticking out of him, and he's holding it real tight. He's mouthing words, but nothing comes up. I see him till my wet eyes make him all blurry, and I fall asleep. My imaginary brother is so tall, he can get me to places I've never been. Today, he took me to the attic. It's usually locked, but Mom forgot to lock it this time. It's hot and dusty up here, but I want to explore. Opening boxes and looking out the dusty window. I know I'm safe because my big brother is watching me. I can feel his eyes now as I open a box. There he is, smiling, clear as a picture with me and Mommy. I take the dusty photo and show it to Mom. She gets the same wet eyes I do at night. Then she gets mad. Her face gets so red, and she paces. She keeps looking at something in the kitchen. Eventually, she asks me where I found it. I go up to the attic to show her, but when I do, the hatch closes behind me. I've been pulling on the hatch, hitting me, screaming, knocking on the window. I beg my imaginary brother to help me. He is so strong, he can protect me. He isn't there though. He was, but he isn't now. Because Mom gets mad sometimes, and she does things that make her sad. She never changes her mind though. Never. When she means to do something, she does it. I guess my brother and I could be imaginary together now. Okay, from the beginning, it seemed like it was so long ago. It started with the accident. The other guy wasn't looking, and he blew right through the light and slammed into my car. My life didn't flash before my eyes. It was just like everything stopped, all at once, all of a sudden. For a while, until the cop pulled me out, I thought I was dead. They rushed me to the hospital, and I was more shaken up than anything. But God help me, was I shaken up. They let me go just a few hours later. Other than the gash on my head, which they bandaged up, I was okay. I was okay. But I felt like something was wrong. There was a woman walking down the road, and I stopped her and asked for the time. The moment she saw me, she screamed and ran. The next person I stopped did the exact same thing. Was there something wrong with me? Was the wound bleeding or something? Wait, what if This horrible thought grabbed a hold of my mind, and it wouldn't go. I kept thinking of the car accident, and what just happened, and what I had thought. I kept thinking of the people who had run away from me, screaming. I ran home. There was a hearse parked in front. That's it. Of course. It had to be, of course. For some reason, whatever I was now, hadn't accepted it, hadn't realized it, but someone ran out of the house next door. She saw me, and her jaw dropped. I said, "Don't be frightened. I'm not trying to scare you. It's just that for some reason, my soul can't." She said, "Mr. Peters? Mr. Peters? Where have you been? Your wife?" "What?" "There was an accident. She's dead." She saw something behind me. Her eyes grew wide, and she screamed. I turned around to see my wife standing there. There was nothing wrong with me at all. It was my wife who was following me home from the hospital. Gunshots erupted in the hallways during the transition from first to second period. Just as the first few shots echoed, the principal's shaky voice declared lockdown over the intercom. This was not a drill. Students dropped their backpacks and sprinted for their lives, diving into classrooms, whilst all teachers locked their doors and turned off the lights, ushering students under the desks. Being teenagers, the students had naturally believed themselves to be immortal. Now they all held back tears. This was the first time they've ever truly feared for their lives. Two panicked students barreled around the corner, then slid to a stop. A teacher's urgent whisper grabbing their attention.
Annie, Melissa, get in here.
Mr. Anderson called to them. The students rushed into the room with Mr. Anderson, the drama teacher, crying and trembling with fear.
It's gonna be okay. Don't worry,
Mr. Anderson said. It appeared he'd been shot, for he was clutching his leg as he bled. He let go of his leg to hold Annie tightly, trying to console her. Melissa joined the hug, clinging to him tightly.
Everything's gonna be okay.
Mr. Anderson repeated to them.
You'll be fine.
The girls almost believed him until he let go of them and took some steps back. They looked at him, confused. But then Melissa's jaw slowly dropped, unable to scream. Annie's eyes widened, tears slowly escaping her eyes and moving down her face. Mr. Anderson smiled at the girls as he pulled a pistol from his pocket. His leg was fine. It was covered in fake blood. His smile never left his face as he locked the door behind him and cocked his gun. Whenever I mention at social mixers that I used to be a cop, someone asks for a story. I usually tell one. I pick something funny or something exciting. I stay away from the grisly and miserable. No one wants to hear about little girls involved in a traffic collision or going to the same house 3 days a week for domestic disputes. Those stories ruin the mood, so I save them for my therapist. This story is one of the ones I don't tell. It was Halloween, 1974, and the great satanic panic was just gaining traction among the evangelicals that make up my district. Allegations and rumors of abuse and dark magic spread like wildfire, coming hand in hand with anxiety following the Saudi oil embargo of 1973. We on the police force heard all about it. Children being abducted and tortured in dark red pentagrams. Poison candy. Teenagers opening themselves up to domestic possession through drug abuse and rock and roll. We heard it first from the pulpit on Sunday mornings, then from frantic 911 calls from terrified housewives that invariably led nowhere. That is, until Halloween 1974. We were out in force that night, on hand to protect trick-or-treaters and keep the peace. Halloween that year coincided with the full moon. I remember that distinctly. That blazing white light bathed the town almost as good as the street lamps did. We got a call from the pastor's wife, whispering about satanic rituals going on in the woods outside her home. The police chief didn't become chief by ignoring influential citizens, so we went out to investigate. I remember thinking it was a complete waste of time. Probably teenagers listening to music too loudly. We beat through the bushes, the moonlight guiding us. We found a clearing where she said the Satanists were. And, well, I'm not sure what all was there. My therapist says trauma affected the memory. I suppose that's possible. I remember bits and pieces, usually after I awake from a nightmare. There was a pentagram drawn in scorch marks in the dirt. The trees were carved with something, maybe graffiti, but I can't see in my head anymore. I break out in sweat just trying. The symbols seem to shift around if you stared at them too long. I remember the photographer throwing up, trying to snap photos of them, and I remember refusing to look at the pictures years later. We found a body, a little boy who went missing earlier that night. The crime scene reports are clear that he was skinned alive. I wondered later why I hadn't seen the child that night, hadn't even known there has been a murder at all until I saw it in the newspaper. How could I have seen the pentagram and not the child inside it? We never got a suspect, just left the case open and moved on. That is the kind of story that ruins parties. Ordering pizza on Halloween never made sense to me. Shouldn't people be full enough with candy? My motorbike rattles to a stop at the address. I curse under my breath at Papa Vitale's pizzeria for making me drive on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. 3 pepperoni pies can't be worth all this effort. A few seconds after I ring the doorbell, an elderly couple answers. Thank you, dear, breezes the wife, hurriedly riffling through her purse for money. You can just go ahead and leave the pizzas on the front porch. You want me to leave your pizzas on the doorstep? I repeat, incredulous.
That's what we're paying you for, isn't it?
Barks her white-haired husband. Following the instructions of the wackadoo couple, I pop open one of the lids and prepare to toss pizza on the floor. Wait, yelps the woman all of a sudden, her face going pale white. You forgot the blood. The blood? The fresh pig's blood we requested on our pizza when we ordered it. It's not there. I guess we just assumed, that it was a joke, 'cause it's Halloween? I give a nervous chuckle, expecting laughter, but the fogies only grow more and more stone-faced. Look, lady, I don't know what to tell you, I interject. I don't even know why they put those little round plastic table thingies in the pizza boxes. I just deliver stuff. If you and your husband really want to eat pig's blood, then...
Idiot boy, the pizzas aren't for us,
shouts the man furiously.
Therefore,
his voice trails off suddenly as he notices something in the distance. Looking over my shoulder, I see a crowd of small figures approaching from the end of the road. In the dim moonlight, I can just about make out the trick-or-treaters' decomposing costumes. What are the odds of every kid in the street dressing as the exact same monster? That's when it clicks. I didn't see any other houses on my drive here, only a graveyard. Panicked, I turn back to see the couple have slammed the door in my face. Unless I can coat these pizzas in fresh blood within the next minute, I'm zombie chow. I still don't know what that little round plastic table thingy in the pizza's boxes is for, but pressing its jagged prongs against my forearm, I think I found at least one good use for it. Sweetie, now are you sure you don't want to take your glasses off for tonight? I shake my head firmly. Mom sighs and casts her eyes to her sewing machine, as if to suggest that her hours dedicated to my Indiana Jones costume were a waste. Stepping in, Dad chides her for for her competitiveness, reminding Mom that it's only a Halloween costume. My perception isn't actually that bad. Even though I've been wearing glasses since I was 6, I can see well enough without them to get by for a few hours. And yet, there's absolutely no way I'm leaving them at home. Not tonight, of all nights. The evening's trick-or-treating starts off being mostly uneventful. As usual, I go door to door with my young sister, eagerly collecting our fill of sugary treats. Before we can reach the last house on the street, however, we run directly into a band of neighborhood kids, dressed to the nines as ghosts, witches, and the like. They respond to me with their standard greeting. A fist strikes me hard across the face, sending me crashing to the ground, and my glasses skittering sideways. Pointing and laughing, the bullies unleash taunt after taunt.
Had a feeling we'd see you here, nerd. No explorer I know wears glasses, geek. You should have come as an alien instead, Four Eyes.
After crushing my basket under their feet, my tormentors take off towards the final house, clutching fistful of stolen candy. My little sister, mortified, runs straight home. Unbothered, I gather my spectacles and polish them against my sleeve, just like I do at the end of every Halloween. I sneak towards the break in Mr. Tillman's fence, positioning myself directly in front of his living room window. From my vantage point, I can't see what's going on at the door, but I can hear the doorbell. I hear Mr. Tillman greet my neighborhood friends and hear their impish crackles turn to horrified screams. I hear the swishing of tentacles, the snapping of brake, and the scraping of fingernails against floorboards. And finally, as the turmoil moves into the living room, I see everything. For the next hour, I sit back and watch with pleasure as my favorite neighbor devours some treats of his very own. I know that wearing glasses while trick-or-treating can be an awful hassle, but some things are just worth viewing in high definition. The traveling carnival had gone downhill in recent years. Costs had been cut, and many of the performers had left. There were exhibits, but they weren't drawing crowds like they used to. The pickled punks, deformed fetuses preserved in jars of green liquid, had lost their allure. At the last stop, the carnival barker had dropped one, and when the fetus hit the dirt, it bounced. Word got around, nothing but rubber fakes. The Fiji mermaid, horrific sea spawn of the far orient, was also fake. Just the top half of a spider monkey sewn to the bottom half of a sea bass, stuffed full of cotton. Visitors glanced at it momentarily, but truthfully, it just made them feel bad for the monkey. Finally, at the back were the Siamese twins. The visitors had already paid to enter the tent, but the carnival barker, spewing his sales pitch at high volume, demanded an extra nickel to draw the curtains. Visitors tossed some in the bucket, fully anticipating disappointment. The curtains reeled back to reveal the Siamese twins. 2 heads, 2 torsos, but only one of the twins was moving. The other was clearly some kind of rubber prosthetic, lolling around limply while the real performer danced. The carnival barker clapped in rhythm as he kicked his feet. One visitor, unimpressed, asked if he could have his nickel back. "No," said the barker, As soon as the visitors left the tent, Chang collapsed, cradling his brother Eng. "What was in the champagne you fed him?" Chang hissed. When they'd announced their plans to leave the carnival at the end of the season, the barker had presented them with 2 glasses of bubbling liquor. Chang had declined. Eng had not.
Now, my friend,"
answered the carnival barker, striking a match.
"We're nothing but bubbly, meant to send you off proper to greener pastures."
But Chang knew the truth. "You didn't want us to leave the carnival. Admit it. You knew you'd be nothing without us." The barker waved the match at the end of his cigarette, entirely unoffended.
"Friend, are you accusing me of poisoning your dear brother?"
"He's barely breathing," Chang whispered, slapping his brother's face. "You have to take us to the doctor."
"Ain't no doctor worth his salt that'd treat a Chinaman,"
answered the barker, between drag on his cigarette.
"Tell you what, you earned enough coin to pay for the veterinarian. I'll fetch him after he's done with the elephants."
We've only made 65 cents today," Chang pleaded. "Please, if he dies, I'll die too."
"Shame,"
the barker responded, exiting the tent flap.
"I guess your bones will make a good display."
Chang sobbed, listening to his brother's final gasps, knowing full well that as long as they were conjoined, their fates were intertwined. The barker, as if reading Chang's mind, popped his head back inside.
"Or,"
he said,
"I do have a hacksaw. What do you think folks pay to watch that?"
One summer, I worked as a house cleaner for this family down the road for some pocket money. It was fun, mostly. "Hello, is anybody home?" I called out of habit as I poked my head through the door.
"Yes, we are upstairs,"
answered the husband.
"Please, go ahead and just ignore us."
"Okay, cool." As I said, this was fun. Simple job. So I went ahead. I heard the door being shut upstairs, some rhythmic pounding noises, and then, alas, some moaning. "Really?" I sighed exaggerately and muttered to myself. "You know I'm down here, right?" Putting on my headphones, I shook my head in disgust one more time before continuing with my work, pretending that I knew nothing. It was a while before I heard some loud footsteps running down the hollow timber stairs. The sound of the front door flung open, then slammed shut, and finally, the sound of the lock clicked. Probably the husband going somewhere, I shrugged. Half an hour later, their bedroom door was still closed, and no sound was emanating from it. Well, this is convenient, isn't it? How am I supposed to hoover the house now, miss? I will sleep whenever I want, I thought bitterly. I don't have all day to stand here waiting for you to wake up. Faced with no other choice, I had to knock on the door. "Excuse me, are you sleeping in there? Can I hoover the house?" No answer, but the door slowly drifted open. It wasn't locked. I screamed out of the horror when the scene in the bedroom raped my vision. Red, the whole bed was red with blood. The wife lay dead in the middle, knife sticking out of her chest. Her hair turned to the door, and her unblinking eyes stared directly into mine. I reacted like the idiot I was, ran up to her corpse and shook her, like that would make any difference. Hey, wake up! Can you hear me? Wake up! The congealed blood on her chest stuck on my cleaning gloves, but I didn't give up. I continued to shake and call until the sound of sirens swamped into my ears. I heard hurried footsteps and muffled voices, then one louder than the rest. It was the husband's voice.
Please, hurry up. I locked the murderer inside.
I can't really remember my dad, but I remember his funeral. My mom cried a lot. I can't even bear to hear my mom cry. I shuffled and stropped and sulked throughout. Why did it have to take place on a Saturday? I was missing my favorite cartoons. My baby sister, Millie, wouldn't stop wailing all the way through. Real sharp shrieks, stabbing like an ice pick into our ears. My Uncle Mike read a dumb poem, or at least he tried to. It was called He's Not Dead, But Sleeping. He kept losing it and clung to the podium like it was the rigging of the Titanic. He stank of scotch, too. That same phrase, he's not dead, but sleeping, was carved ornately onto my dad's black marble gravestone, too. My mom had held my hand too tightly. She told me never to forget that my daddy had been very tired recently and was simply sleeping peacefully, and that we should see this as a blessing relief. She made it sound real convincing, like a good mom should. Then she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. The priest read another sermon, his eyes aligned with kindness. Then my mom tried to say a few words, but couldn't really. Millie was passed back and forth until Mandy handed her to me. Here, she said, you're always good at calming her down. Then Aunt Mandy went to steady my mom, whose legs were shaking. The service ended, shots were downed, sandwiches were nibbled. I was a good boy and didn't pester anyone. I hoped this will all be over soon. Millie was very heavy in my small arms, and I was glad when my mom finally took her back from me. Then everything was suddenly in utter confusion. Voices calling all around, bodies pushing forward. Someone shook me hard, their fingers gripping like claws onto my shoulders. Hey, it's okay, I said. Millie was just tired, so I made her go to sleep. I was tasked to go back and stop our mistake. Time travel was achieved in the years 75-38. Many countries worked together to accomplish this feat, and since then, the whole world has been tuned into the discoveries we've made visiting our past. The first mission sent a group back to the year 2000. We returned with a newspaper which highlighted the new century and Y2K. We don't use paper anymore, but the world rejoiced over our success, and each household wanted their very own newspaper copy, which celebrated the triumph over Y2K more than 2,000 years ago. 6 months have passed since that first mission, and we have continued to go back in time to learn about the origins of our species. We had finally come closer to understanding how our universe formed, and a better idea of how our universe operates. But we hit a problem. For some reason, we could no longer travel back any further. Our last trip was 6 billion years into the past. We couldn't go beyond that. This saddened researchers immensely. Yet, focus was shifted to exploring working within the 6 billion year time frame. Problems continued still, however, as we could not travel back in the past anymore, it seemed. We worked on the machine to see why it wasn't working. At the same time, a team of theoretical physicists had continued to refine our understanding of time travel with each trip made, but their most recent discovery shocked the world. They predicted using the time machine required us to deplete the time we had left in the universe. This was why we could no longer travel so far back. We decided that we needed to go back in time to warn ourselves of this grave mistake in our last hopes to make it right. I was tasked to go back and stop our mistake. This was 8 months ago, when our mission to go back to our first use of the time machine failed. We could no longer undo the damage. Tomorrow marks the predicted final day of our universe. No one knows what to expect. But if our rules of time travel are correct, we used up around 100 billion years this universe had left in less than a year. Curiosity really is a bitch. Back in around 2000, 2001, I was driving by myself from visiting my mom in Colorado back to Arizona. I was in a station wagon and had a desk my mom had given me that was my grandfather's. I've always been scared driving at night. This might be because of too many scary movies or because my mom's paranoia rubbed off on me. I was in the army and drove back and forth a lot to visit her. She would get mad at me for sleeping at rest stops or gas stations, and would always tell me that eventually something bad is going to happen, that someone is going to kidnap me or even kill me. But I just didn't want to bother with the hassle and expenses of a motel most of the time. I digress. So I'm driving an empty stretch of highway late at night with no other cars around me. This red truck comes up behind me, flashing his lights and honking his horn loud. I was thinking to myself that there was something wrong with my car, or maybe there was something wrong with the desk in the hatchback. Otherwise, why else would he be insisting on me pulling over? So I decided to pull over. I was in my mid-20s at the time and still a bit naive. While I'm getting out of the car, I noticed the car behind me is still flashing his lights and honking his horn. I got about to the middle of my car while going to the back to check what was going on when it hit me. Why is he still honking his horn when I'm already out of my car and pulled over? I found that quite odd. Then I hear the sound of a door open, a person stepping out of the car, and the door shut. I can't explain this feeling to this day, but something just felt wrong. I just felt like I should not be there at that moment. I jumped back in my car as fast as I could and sped off. The next exit was 45 miles away. This truck behind me followed me the entire way. I took the first exit to go to a crowded grocery store with a laundromat next to it. There was an ambulance parked at the laundromat with its light flashing, so I decided to park right next to it, thinking if an ambulance is present, a cop should show up eventually. Shortly after, the same truck with the same guy inside pulls up to the grocery parking lot and parks his truck directly in front of me. I was terrified, frozen. I couldn't bring myself to get out of the car. I waited for quite some time until he suddenly, as if out of nowhere, got up and left. After he left, I decided to wait longer before continuing my drive back to Arizona. I was paranoid and watchful for any red trucks the entire time. Fast forward about 5 or 6 years. I'm sitting in front of the TV and watching an unsolved mysteries type of show when a very interesting story pops up. One about a man on that exact same stretch of highway with a red truck. A man who used to honk his horn and flash his lights until random strangers will pull over so he could kidnap and murder them. I can only thank my gut for telling me something is wrong and making me get out of that situation. I try not to think what would happen otherwise. I was watching my daughter's kids while she and her husband went out of town. They have a teenage daughter named Alyssa. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke up by a weird rustling sound and looked out of the window and saw movement. I saw a boy emerge from the bushes on the other side of the house. I saw a bike tossed on the lawn that definitely was not ours. My first thought was that it was a burglar, casing houses, but since he looked young and came through on a bike, I figured scaring him straight would be enough for him to decide to head home. So I went out on the porch, flipped the lights on, and said,
"Can I help you?"
in my classroom voice. The guy looked surprised, but not nervous. He was wearing a Letterman-style jacket, but once I got a clear view of him in the streetlight, he seemed much older than my granddaughter, gruff and more wiry than athletic. He walked up close to the house and said, "Yes, I'm looking for Alyssa." I gave him a disapproving glare, hoping he'd realize he came looking for a girl late at night, and a grumpy old person answered instead, and that now it's time to split. I was thinking what must have happened is that Alyssa knew her parents were going out of town, and maybe before she knew I'd be staying over, she told a secret older boyfriend to come over. It was late, and I was alone with several kids, so I didn't want him coming any closer to the house. I also thought it was a bit weird that he came this late and wanted to be sure Alyssa actually wanted to talk to him. "I'm sorry, who?" I said. "Alyssa," he said. "Alyssa Lambert. This is her house." This showed me he knew her last name. They must be at least friends. I asked him to wait at the porch. He started to walk up, and I just felt this sick feeling in my gut. Instinct kicked in. I yelled.
No, stop. This is a private property and you will wait right there.
I close the door, get to Alyssa's room, and wake her up, saying something along the lines of, I don't know what the big idea was to have friends over at this time of night, but you can go ahead and tell them to go home. She looked at me as if she has no clue what I'm talking about. I said, there's a guy outside asking for you. Confused, she gets up and goes to the window. She sees him and turns white as a sheet. He asked for me? Yes. By name? Yes. Call the police. I've never seen him in my life. I grabbed the phone and called 911 immediately. But as I was on the phone with them, Alyssa started tugging at my arm. He's coming up. I had younger kids in the house to think about. So I slightly opened the door, just enough to yell out and say that I spoke to my husband and none of us know any Alyssa. Leave the property or I'm calling 911. The man got angry and started yelling for her to come out. Thankfully, the police came pretty quickly. And as soon as the man heard the sirens, he grabbed his bike and took off. I watched him pull up next to a car with no front headlights or plates and speed off. The police followed in the same direction, but couldn't find a thing, not the bike or the car. They then advised us to take Alyssa's social media details offline completely. Who knows what was waiting for Alyssa inside that car? My best friend is an influencer. Not big time, but a big enough following to get free shit and has gotten 2 sponsored trips. She still works a full-time job, but does the Instagram thing on the side, mostly because of the perks. She's not big enough to live off of this yet. Anyways, this was her first trip. A little boutique hotel from Miami contacted her via Instagram DM and offered her an all-expenses-paid trip to Miami for Memorial Weekend 2018 in exchange for her to be in the hotel and take pictures and do a couple of stories. She was told she could bring a female friend with her if she wanted to, and that everything would be covered for that friend as well. This was her first time doing this, so at the time she wasn't really sure of how it worked. They sent her a bogus contract for her to sign, and it said she'd be responsible for paying for her plane ticket to Miami, and that should be reimbursed for it later. This was to prevent a no-show, meaning the influencer will get the ticket purchased by the hotel, and the influencer will never show. It seemed reasonable. My friend chose to invite me. We figured it shouldn't be a big deal. In worst case scenario, they don't want to pay for my plane ticket and should just cover it for me, and that's that. We were supposed to be picked up by the hotel at the airport. So the day comes and we arrive to Miami. There's a guy holding a sign with her name and the paper has the hotel logo. We are greeted and we are escorted to a black SUV. Here's where it gets weird. As soon as we are getting on the car, the driver is visibly upset. We thought he was talking to the guy who walked us over to the car, but he was talking to my friend. He had a very thick accent and was wearing dark shades. He was telling my friend that she's not allowed to bring her boyfriend, me, and that she said it was 2 girls. 2 girls. The hotel told me 2 girls, not 1 girl and 1 guy. 2 girls. He was demanding to see where the other girl was. We were speechless and confused. The guy who walked us to the car looked annoyed and started to fight with the driver in Portuguese. Then he turns to us and asks us where the other girl is. My friend, which is visibly upset right now, tells them that there's no other girl and that she's the person they were supposed to pick up for the Instagram deal, and that I'm just the friend who's coming along with her on this trip. The big guy who sat in the passenger seat, the guy who walked us to the car, gets out of the car, tosses our luggage out of it, and says something along the lines of, "This is some fucking bullshit," gets in the car, and they take off. And that was it. We were in shock. Utter and complete shock. My friend immediately emails Melissa, the PR person who we had been in contact through email with, to tell her what happened. No response. We decide to take a cab and show up to the hotel. As soon as we showed up, everything made sense. The hotel had been rebranded and had a completely different name, owner, and staff. We walked in and showed the staff the Instagram page, which they agreed was indeed the Instagram page of the hotel it used to be, but not the new one. This Instagram account had more than 10,000 followers and seemed quite real. However, upon further inspection, we realized the pictures and uploads were quite old. My friend felt like an idiot and would not stop crying. We called the police, met up with a detective. Nothing ever came out of it. They investigated who was running the account before, or who had access to it. None of the people who used to run the account had anything to do with it. Nothing ever came out of this. It's upsetting and scary to know that whoever wanted to abduct my friend or any other girls by using this old hotel Instagram account knows who my friend is. The hotel's Instagram page has since been deleted, and we never heard anything from anyone ever again. But to think my friend would have been kidnapped had she gone with another girl instead of me sends chills down my spine. Life isn't easy when you're a single college student, especially when you're a guy, a 21-year-old South Korean to be exact. Neil struck out pretty often. Even more frustrating was that I was reasonably handsome. I stayed in shape. My round face accentuated by my spiked black hair. With the boom of K-pop, I figured I'd be causing a mass hysteria like the Beatles. But that wasn't the case. I stayed alone in my dorm. And this December night, no different. I started the computer. Tonight was slow on the dating apps. Drunk and frustrated, I went into emergency mode, searching for a fresh, new dating app. Shivering in the cold, I stole a glance at my closed dorm door, and then, on my phone, I found it. A brand new dating app with a 4-star rating. Eat Your Heart Out, it was called. So, with nothing left to lose, I downloaded the app and made an account. Almost immediately, a notification box popped up. Allow Eat Your Heart Out to access your location while you're using the app? Of course, I hit yes. Standard stuff for those kind of apps. Before I could even scout the scene, I had to make a brief bio, upload some photos, slog through the validation process, as if I were undergoing a medical exam. My phone then jolted to life, over and over. Notifications poured in. Rather than excitement, I felt disappointed. Must be bots, I figured. Not even the ugly girls were desperately waiting on new members. I clicked on my profile pic. The shirtless photo was now getting countless likes, countless comments. Intrigued, I scrolled through them, and in the chilling loneliness, I became unnerved.
He looks yummy.
A middle-aged dad said,
I can't wait to cut into that,
exclaimed a soccer mom. Battling the unease, I looked around the dorm. For once, I was glad to be alone. Another vibration pulled me back to the app. Looks like we're having Chinese tonight, said a bearded country guy. Angry, I replied to him, I'm Korean, asshole. More comments arrived. Young and tasty. I'll be sure to eat the heart out. I got ready to delete the damn thing until a new comment caught my eye. I'm on the way for you, said a muscular man. Panicking, I went to the locals page. There, my profile pic stood in the corner of the single C, the middle of this menu. A smaller caption under my pic read, 10 miles away, FSU campus, Azilla Hall, room 17. That was my exact location. Trembling, I went to my messages. For once, the flooded inbox gave me fear rather than excitement.
I'm hungry and thirsty. Can't wait to meet you.
I was speechless, scared beyond belief. Then, a brutal knock hit my door. I turned to face it. Then, several other knocks. I resisted the idea of a nanny box for a long time. It seemed inhumane to me. And I guess, if I'm being honest, it felt like an admission of failure as a father. We shouldn't have needed the help. We should have been able to afford the right sort of care. We should have been able to make the necessary time. But life is hard, and compromise comes easier and easier as you get older. Besides, everyone else was doing it. It was the only option most of us could afford. So, when Julian was 4 months old, we bought a nanny box. And that's where Julian spent his days, while Harriet and I worked. There's no way to know what it's really like inside the box. The advertisements made it all sound very stimulating. It's supposedly very immersive and comforting for a small child, stimulating all the usual inputs a child that age needs, beaming the information directly into the brain. It provided food, it kept your baby clean, and it was tested, they said. It was safe. Most importantly, however, there was Julian, who remained our happy, alert boy, meeting every development benchmark, right on schedule. It wasn't until Julian's first word that we began to understand what we'd done. We were eating, Julian in his high chair. Harriet held out the spoon and said, "Say mama." Julian's expression changed so slightly. His mouth curled in unfamiliar ways. "Samsung," he replied. Harriet blinked. "Mama?" she said. "Samsung," said Julian, a little more forcefully. "Samsung 4K." Julian giggled and clapped. We both tried to pass it off as a case of monkey see, monkey do. But Julian got older and more talkative, and he never learned to say mama or dada. "Julian, how are you today?" we asked. "Build a website with Squarespace," he said, smiling, so bright behind the eyes. "Julian, what's my name?" I asked. "Shop Wayfair, for home decor on a budget," he says, so sure of himself. There were lawsuits, of course. We were part of one of the bigger class action suits. But the truth is that no amount of money would ever bring back Julian's mind. There's no way to undo the mistakes that we made. They say there are something like 400,000 box babies in the United States alone. You may see one from time to time. You'll say hello, and they'll say, shop the dollar value menu for McDonald's. You'll say, have a nice day, and they'll say, a great day starts with Jimmy Dean microwavable breakfast. You'll say, I love you, son, and they'll say, start earning bonus miles with Capital One today. Over time, you learn to just smile when that happens. After all, it's not their fault. Break-ins aren't uncommon. I've worked at a park for 10 years, and I can tell you for a fact that teens clipping through the chain links and taking the aqua loop for a midnight joyride is a regular occurrence. Standard procedure is to clean up the mess and get on with it. It's hardly an end-of-the-day scenario. This latest incident, the trouble amounted to replacing a broken padlock on one of the perimeter gates and scrubbing a couple of muddy boot prints from the mouth of one of the tube slides feeding into the main pool. Like I said, pretty standard procedure. We checked the security tapes. Guy with a duffel bag entered, then left 4 hours later. We figured he was probably getting high and jerking off to National Enquirer clippings, or whatever it is meth heads do in their downtime. In a park that serves around 1,000 kids daily, solving that mystery wasn't exactly our top priority. Park opened up like normal. Nice summer's day. I was standing next to the main pool, lifeguard duty, just making sure all the kids are safe. It's largely a dull, uneventful job. So when Raj, one of our security officers, approached me and struck up a conversation, it was a welcome break.
Hey,
he said, holding out something that glinted in the sun.
check this shit out. Found it on the grass near the gate. Health and safety hazard, don't you think?
He was showing me a razor blade. Oh shit, I said. Good catch, bud. Hate to see someone step on that. Raj nodded. Then there was this triple, echoing scream from inside the tube slide. I don't think I'll ever forget it. Just the animal yelp of desperate fear and pain, as a kid's skin, bright red, in a tail of bloody water, came trembling out into the main pool. They were shaking and shrieking. I swear to God, it was the stuff of nightmares. It's a little girl, and when I get a hold of her, I see her skin opening up all over her body, and these long, ragged gashes. She's shaking, completely in shock and pain, bleeding everywhere. Everyone in the pool is hysteric. As I'm carrying her over to the medical bay, I can't help but think about that tiny little razor blade Raj showed me. Now let me ask you a question. Do you have any idea how many of those things someone can superglue to the inside of a water slide in 4 uninterrupted hours? Because now, I sure as hell do. A quick fact for you, for those who are living under a rock. There are different time zones. So different countries get into 2020 first. At first, New Zealand, then some of Russia, then Australia. They all got into the new year. They all went dark. The satellite feeds showed zero light coming from them as soon as the clock had turned 12. No one knows what to do, and as more and more countries go into the new year, the more go dark. It's about 2 hours from midnight here, and everyone is freaking out. I work at air traffic control, and planes have been going off radar all day. We've been waiting for reports of crashed planes, but none have came up. All the flights have been grounded and cancelled until further notice, so we are just waiting up here, looking at the radar and calling our families to say our possible goodbyes. The phone lines have gone down to those places too. People have been cut off mid-phone call, as the person on the other line went into the new year. There wasn't even an answering machine. Only the classic "we're sorry" recorded message, which means the phone line no longer exists. The news don't know what to do, so the government put out an emergency broadcast. But Washington went out before they could actually do so. We've been looking around different websites and see that even neighbors with different time zones across the street go dark once the time hits. A coworker said that his friend walked across the zone and just vanished. But I'm taking that with a grain of salt. There's nothing we can do but just sit and wait for the inevitable. I just hope that whatever happens when the clock strikes 12 is better than what we had last year.